My beautiful friend Millie is getting married this year and she asked me to make her wedding dress and I said yes. So here we are making a wedding dress. I've only ever made one wedding dress in the past and I didn't know it was a wedding dress, and someone ended up wearing it as their wedding dress. So this is my first proper wedding dress and I feel like there is a lot of pressure, but I'm just trying not to think about that, and I'm just seeing it as making a dress. It's like the normal process of making a dress. So I thought it'd be fun to bring you along on the journey. I've already had a big phase of testing the dress, toiling it, doing everything like that. Today I'm actually going to do some ruffle samples because she wants a little ruffles on the dress. I will put a picture of her little drawing up on the screen so you can see what she wants. I didn't have to design anything. Millie had the idea in her head and she saw a picture from a vintage wedding dress and she was like, do you think you can make that? And I was like, yeah. So here we are making the wedding dress. It's in a beautiful silk taffeta. I started on the bodice last night because I wanted to make sure I got the darts in with the fabric on the right side. I don't know if there is a right or wrong side to this fabric, it's very hard to tell. The bodice is very simple, which is great, but it also means that there's more room for error because it has to be so precise with the darts and all of the little bits and bobs, but I'm just taking it slowly, doing French seams wherever possible. It's also being lined with silk. Not sure exactly the name of this fabric, but this is going to feel so lovely against her skin in the dress. So this morning I'm going to work on the ruffles and then I need to add the loop trim to the back. Let me show you. I've been learning a lot about wedding dresses from this process, one of which I didn't understand how anyone would bother sewing all of those loops on for all the little buttons, but then I realised it's a trim. So you just stitch this on down one side and then you've got all your button loops. So that's pretty perfect. I might stitch this on first thing and then we can get playing with the ruffles because I want to see if I have a gathering foot for my industrial machine, because I have one for my little one but not for this. So I want one loop right at the very top. I'm going to put one loop in the seam allowance for now and I can chop that out later. And I'm going to set a very long stitch length. So I'm going to stitch down the centre of this trim. I have the button loop trimming stitched on. That's looking alright. So that's ready for when I sew that seam. And now I need to attach the lining and the outer at the neckline. And I'm going to try doing a little French seamed neckline. So let's see how this goes. I'm just pinning with these little clip pins because I can't put actual pins into the silk, otherwise it punctures it and leaves a mark. So they're coming in very handy. The neckline really is so important because it's the first thing that your eye gets drawn to in a garment, so we've got to make sure it's stitched on properly and neatly. So I'm going to tack it into place. That is all tacked into place and now we can French seam this. Now I need to go and trim down this seam allowance. I'm definitely not using the rotary cutter on this bit because that would end in tears. I'm just cutting as close to the stitch line as I can. To press this inside out. So we're going to press that lining away from the outside. I'm going to clip pin the neckline again before I sew it, so that I know it's not moved anywhere. So now we can go and stitch around there with a very small seam allowance. That's the French seam sewn in, and now I'm going to understitch the French seam to the lining so that it doesn't pop up out of the neckline. There we go, we've understitched, and now I'm going to go and press this under. I'm now going to sew down the back seams. Not doing these as a French seam, I'm just doing these as a simple seam, and then I'm going to try doing a French seam actually on this back one. Just trimmed and pressed the seam around. That's the side where the buttons are going to go on, all finished. I decided to do a French seam with that as well, but I don't think I'll be able to do a French seam with this one because I don't want to risk cutting into the elastic and the loops going anywhere. So I'm just going to do that with a 1 cm seam allowance. I've stitched the back together, and now I'm going to understitch the lining so that it folds nicely around the corner, and we have our little button loops. That's the scary part of the bodice done. The back is now looking nice and neat. We've got the area where the buttons are going to go on, and we have the looped trim stitched on. So next I need to add the skirt to the front and back, and then we can add the zip in the side. I'm just going to tack together the lining and the outer. Finding all of the skirt pieces now for the outer and the lining, and I'm going to attach them with a French seam down the middle. I'm going to use a little bit of tape to mark where the front side is, just in case I get confused when I'm placing the French seam. I've pinned all along the waistband with wrong sides facing. Now I'm going to go and stitch all the way across with a 0.5 cm seam allowance. I've sewn down the centre, now I need to trim down the seam, and then I can fold the skirt back up and we can stitch down a nice French seam. Trim the seam down, and now I'm going to press it open. I can. Okay, now we can put the top skirt back over, bottom skirt under. I've pinned that into place, and now we can stitch along there with a 0.5 seam allowance. Now we've got a French seam hiding underneath 2 skirts. Now that the front is on, I can go and add the back, and the back is really fun because it's got a little puddle at the back, little puddle train. It always amazes me just how quickly a dress can actually come together if it's quite a simple construction. But the thing that's going to take me a while with this dress is the ruffles. Finish the back French seam. I'm going to give it a little press. This is what the back's looking like with the skirt attached. I'm going to go and have some lunch and then we can work on the zip. I've sewn down the left hand side seam and opened the seam up. I've not sewn it all the way down, and this is just so that I can place the zip on top and tack it into place. But this has been so useful, this little ironing ham that I made. It's so good for ironing on curves. It's just amazing. I'm so glad I made this. Can't believe I didn't make one sooner. So now I've got my zip that I'm using, and I'm going to pop this face down into place and just pin it all the way down on the seam allowance, and then I can tack it into place, and then we can take those stitches out at the front. The zip is now tacked on, and I'll obviously finish the seams inside of the zip once I've sewn it on. Need my trusty zipper foot. The zip is in the side, which means I can sleep soundly tonight. I can do all the little jobs to neaten that up inside tomorrow. It's been a little while since my last clip from this video. I had Christmas, New Year's, and now we're back on wedding dress making. I've done a few little bits off camera which I can show you, and today we are doing ruffles, which I'm looking forward to, but also looking forward to being done because I know these are going to be fiddly. They could test my patience, but it's going to look so good when it's done. I also purchased a wedding dress bag so that I can store this safely and nothing bad will happen to it. This is what she's looking like at the moment, very creased because I've been ironing as I go, but the fabric naturally creases quite a bit. Back's looking really nice with all the button loops going up it. Millie is going to get the buttons made in London. I've given her a sample of the fabrics. There's a man in London that does all sorts of things to do with buttons, so she's going to take the fabric to him, get him to do that, and then bring them back to me and we can sew them on. The side seams are now both sewn together, and I have hemmed the bottom. I made some bias trim and did a neat little hand stitching job around the bottom of the dress. The zip is also finished with the bias trim on the inside, and the lining is so silky and beautiful. So I still need to do the ruffles on the hem and both of the sleeves, which are both ruffly at the ends. So I think I'll do those tomorrow, and I'd really like to get the ruffles on the skirt done today. Already cut the fabric out for it, and I've also cut the fabric out for the belt. So we could make that first. This is the toile of the belt. It's a really long sash style belt, which will just sit around the waist and tie at the front, and then have like nice long flowing sections. I'm just going to start by making one of the ruffles at the bottom, and we can check that it's enough fabric to do because that's going to be the longest section. So what I'm going to do to start with is overlock one long edge, and then that's going to be folded and pressed down, and the other edge is I'm doing a little mini rolled hem by hand all the way along, but not hand sewn, as in like just hand rolled. And then I'm doing a long gathering stitch, just one single gathering stitch along the fold here at the end, and then I'll be pulling that and hand gathering that. So this is where it could be very frustrating, because if that thread breaks, it's going to get real annoying. So I was going to do the gathering by my other machine, but this is too thick and slippery, so it doesn't gather anything, it just doesn't do anything. We're midway through the ruffle. I am just going to attach the ends together before I do the gathering stitch, so that it's just one circle, and then I can pin it on at like quarterly points onto the bottom of the dress, and then even up the gathers all the way around. With the ruffle, I've folded over 1.5 inches, and we've got the rolled hem at the bottom. I'm going to open up the roll at the top, and I'm going to do a little French seam, like a really tiny French seam. So I stitch wrong sides together to start with, and then I'm going to trim this seam down, iron it flat, and sew it closed the other way. So we've got the French seam there, and I'm just going to fold back over the ruffle, and I'm going to go and give that a little press just so that it's sitting nice and flat. Now both ends of that strip are attached nice and neatly, and it'll look nice and clean when it's sat on the dress. Very important next step, I'm going to replace the bobbin thread, because, oh yeah, look, tiny bit of thread left on that. And we're going to put a nice fresh bobbin in, so that we know we've got lots of length of thread to play with. I'm putting my stitch length all the way on setting 5. So I'm actually going to stitch with the fold sitting underneath. Usually I would do it on top, but this is actually a good way of stopping it from bunching up underneath. And I can see through, so I can check that it's actually where it should be. So I'm going to add a good bit of back stitching there, and then I'm just going to go all the way around. I've done the gathering stitch, and now I'm going to find 4 different points to put some markers on. This is the first time I'm using actual pins in this project because they mark the fabric, so I've been having to use clip pins instead. And now we can start gathering. There's one gather. One of the gathers starts here because it decided to pack up on me. Start by slowly gathering everything up. Okay, the first layer of ruffle has been pinned on, and I'm going to go and stitch that down now. Let's start stitching the ruffles on. And I'm just stitching directly on top of where I gathered. One row down, 2 to go. With the next layer, I'm just going to cut about 20, maybe 10 centimeters off, just because the skirt obviously gets smaller as you go up, and so I want the same amount of gathers all the way around. So I'm going to take a little bit off the end and then do exactly the same technique I just did for the other gathers. So I'm going to do that, and then I will catch up with you once I have finished the gathers. We have the finished skirt ruffles. Finished those last night. Oh gosh, this dress is so long, it's literally hitting the ceiling when I hold it up. We've got the 3 tiers of ruffles going on at the bottom. Very happy with how those turned out. It gives the dress a really good weight to it. So the first task of today is to make the belt, and that's just going to be folded over in half, and then the edges fold over to meet the middle, and then sewn down the sides and ends. So I'm going to make that, and then we are moving on to the sleeves today, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll be it until I next see Millie, and she is going to get the buttons made, and we'll stitch the buttons on, and she'll do the veil, and that'll be that. So I need to make sure actually that I get a little clip of her in the dress before she heads off with the dress, so that you can see what it looks like finished with the buttons and everything. So let's take this over to the iron and make the little belt. Belt is done. It's now super long. I need to add the little side loops to hold on to the belt so it doesn't slide down. we've got the top tier ruffles, and then these are the middle ruffles. So I'm going to do these and attach these to the sleeves, but I do need to sew the sleeves together first. I'm going to sew those with a French seam down the side, and then I've just done a parallel row of stitches to gather up on these middle pieces. These ruffles get hidden in the seam allowance on the sleeves, whereas the other top ruffle just sits on top. The length of this ruffle is 2 times the length of the section it's being added onto on the sleeve. Now I've got both sleeves sewn together, so I'm going to add the middle ruffle first. I'm going to turn these inside out, easier. And then I'm going to put this middle ruffle inside the armhole. And now I've got the fun task of adjusting the gathers. The middle ruffles are stitched on. Now I need to make this section that goes in between this and the next ruffle, and I need to make the next ruffle as well. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to French seam these bits, the same as I did with the sleeves, and do the same ruffle that I've done just here. We've got the 2 layers of ruffle on, and now I need to put the 3rd layer on top and stitch this on by hand. I'm pretty sure I won't be able to get the machine near this. This is the only way I could think of adding this on. And then I can just start fiddling around with where it needs to go in comparison to the others, so that there's even spacing between all of these. Time to attempt hand stitching this ruffle on. I've just sewn together the lining pieces for the sleeve, and now I need to attach the end of the sleeve lining to the end of inside of this sleeve, and that'll give a nice neat edge. So let me figure out the best way to do this. Stitch the lining on at the end, and now we're going to turn it back through and hope that it's okay. And then the lining can just sit back up in the sleeve. We're attaching sleeves today. My dad is jet washing outside, so sorry if you can hear that. But they're looking good. I did the gathering stitches along top yesterday to gather in at the cap of the sleeve. So now I can go and pin this onto the dress. I can't tell you how happy I am that I don't have to do ruffles in a tiny little armhole again. So this is what we're doing today. So let's pray to the nice armhole gods that they go in very smoothly. I'm just going to start by turning the bodice inside out. And I'm not going to attach the lining of the sleeve just yet. I'm just going to really focus on getting this outer one looking nice. And then I'll go in and stitch the lining up into this. And then once both of those are attached, I'm going to add some binding to finish off the seam. Do a very loose stitch all the way around just to see what it's looking like. I've just tacked in the sleeve and it's looking good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and sew with a smaller stitch, and then I can attach the lining onto that as well. Well, that went very well, thankfully. The sleeve is in, and I just need to add the bias trim on the inside. I connected the lining up, and we're just going to cover all of this mess now. And trim it off first. We have one sleeve in, all neatly finished on the inside with the bias tape. And now I need to give it a good press, and I'm going to use my ironing ham that I made so that I can really get those curves. And then I can go and attach the other one. Apart from the buttons, the dress is done. It's going to be hard to show you because it's so long, but I will put a little clip next to the video if I can't get a good full length in. I just need to go and trim a few threads. Obviously we've got the buttons left to do. I've just added some little loops by braiding 3 bits of thread together and attaching those at the side so the belt, when it's on, won't slip up and down. And oh, it's quite heavy actually.
Wow. Oh my lord.